Good afternoon. I now call to order the hearing on the fiscal year 2023 budget request for the Department of Energy. This is a hybrid hearing, so we need to address a few housekeeping matters first. For the members joining virtually, once you start speaking, there is a slight delay before you are displayed on the main screen. Speaking into the microphone activates the camera displaying the speaker on the main screen. Do not stop your remarks if you do not immediately see the screen switch. If the screen does not change after several seconds, please make sure you are not muted. To minimize background noise and ensure the correct speaker is being displayed, we ask that you remain on mute unless you have sought recognition. To eliminate inadvertent background noise, I or staff that I designate may mute participants' microphones when they are not recognized. And yesterday, everyone did a beautiful job on behaving on that one. Members are responsible for muting and unmuting themselves, and if you are appearing virtually and I notice when you are recognized that you have not unmuted yourself, I will ask the staff to send you a request to unmute yourself. Please then accept that request so you are no longer muted. In terms of the speaking order, we will begin with the chair and ranking member. Then members present at the time the hearing is called to order will be recognized in order of seniority, followed by members not present at the time the hearing is called to order. Finally, House rules require me to remind you that we have set up an email address to which members can send anything they wish to submit in writing at any of our hearings. That email address has been provided in advance to your staff. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes for my opening statement on the fiscal 2023 budget request for the Department of Energy. We want especially to thank Secretary Granholm for joining us today, and I'm so grateful to have a fellow Great Lakes colleague with such a distinguished career as America's Secretary of Energy. We warmly welcome you back. We gather today to discuss the important work of the Department of Energy in ensuring American energy independence, which is fundamental to our national security. However, as we gather halfway around the world, energy insecurity in Europe is having a profound impact on Russia's war on Ukraine. We are all witnessing a critical test to liberty's survival with energy as a linchpin. I am proud of our efforts in this Congress and the efforts of President Biden to support Ukraine as she fights for her freedom. But Europe cannot be free, nor escape the consequences of tyranny if it continues its reliance on Russian gas and energy that fuels Putin's war. America has led the world in ending its imports of Russia's blood-soaked energy that props up that criminal regime. And it's time for the rest of the world to do the same. This pivotal moment is a blunt reminder how important U.S. energy independence is to our national security. In the second half of the last century, America slid into reliance on imported oil. During the 1970s, our nation learned the hard way the danger of reliance on imported energy as the first Arab oil embargo threw us into deep recession. President Jimmy Carter's foresight and leadership with bipartisan support in Congress created the Department of Energy in 1977. Because of the remarkable work undertaken over decades since that time by both public and private sector leaders, our nation now leads the world as the largest net exporter of natural gas. We lead the world in renewables and the new energy sciences that will hopefully usher us into the hydrogen and advanced nuclear age. In almost every energy sector known to humanity, our nation is pushing the envelope of innovation. The Department of Energy is responsible for addressing the most pressing energy, environmental, and nuclear security issues of our time. The Department's pioneering investments in science, technology, and applied systems are unparalleled, leading to breakthroughs that were never before thought possible. While the 21st century brings new and complicated challenges, it also presents us with an array of opportunities, including the opportunity to safeguard our national security through energy security by reducing American dependence on foreign adversaries, the opportunity to tackle the climate crisis while growing the economy and supporting living wage jobs, the opportunity to advance cutting-edge science and innovation to sustain life on Earth, protect our environmental treasures, and expand our global competitiveness, and the opportunity to cost-effectively provide for the nation's nuclear deterrent while assuring nuclear nonproliferation. We must make more progress for America, invest in new energy technologies, and advance the world-class research that unlocks our full scientific potential. So how do we meet these goals? We must invest in the energy innovations being led by the Department of Energy that preserve American energy independence, conserve our environment, and spur good-paying middle-class jobs for our workers and families. This budget request proposes necessary investments to continue innovations that will further push the energy revolution, keep the U.S. as a global leader, and reduce the influence of foreign energy sources. It calls for investments across the board, from basic research to conservation and capturing waste energy, to developing new, clean energy technologies, and to hardening the electric grid against disasters and cyber threats. This budget request makes a serious investment in the Department's most meaningful Meet the Streets effort, the Weatherization Assistance Program. It is pivotal to the mammoth task of meeting energy conservation horizons for existing structures and neighborhoods by reducing burdensome energy costs on families and seniors, especially those struggling to make ends meet. And let me express my disappointment that 1 month after the administration's budget was released, we have not received a full set of the required supporting budget materials, and this must be rectified promptly for future years. With that, I'll close my remarks, and I'll thank you, Madam Speaker, for being here today. We look forward to discussing this request, and I'd like to turn to our noble ranking member, Mr. Simpson, for his opening remarks.
Thank you, Chairwoman Capter, and welcome, Secretary Grenholm. It's good to have you and meet you in person, and getting back to normal hearings. I kind of look around and go, so this is what our hearing room looks like. It's nice to be back in our hearing room, but thank you for being here. I know you've already suffered through one hearing with the Energy and Commerce Committee all morning long. These are hearings in our committee are generally focused on the budget and the direction the department is taking and stuff, so we'll have some questions about that. But thank you for being here today to review the fiscal year 2023 budget request for the Department of Energy. There are several individual items in this budget request that I support. For example, increased funding for the National Reactor Innovation Center and naval reactors are important programs that I'm very interested in. Unfortunately, the DOE budget request is indicative of the administration's overall budget request, and I think it's out of balance between defense and non-defense needs and inclusive of budget gimmicks to avoid setting real priorities. The request proposes a 17% increase in non-defense programs and only a 2% increase for defense programs. In light of today's runaway inflation, a 2% increase is effectively a cut. Within non-defense programs, I'm very concerned that certain critical issues are not getting the attention they deserve. In particular, the request for the nuclear energy program is a mere $10 million, or less than 1% above enacted, after accounting for the proposed budget structure changes. In contrast, the increase for energy efficiency and renewable energy, which I support the activities of that program, but it is more than $1.7 billion, or more than 54% increase. It is a fact that achieving low-carbon energy goals must include advanced nuclear. Not only is it a zero-emission source, but it is a baseload power that helps ensure reliability of the grid, especially as more intermittent sources like wind and solar are added. We must ensure that the U.S. is a leader in developing advanced nuclear technologies for deployment here at home and around the globe. Second, as the chairman said, I'm concerned about cybersecurity. It is now more than a month after the budget submission, and we just barely got the budget justification for the materials for Caesar. We know the threats are serious. The Colonial Pipeline incident occurred right around the time of last year's DOE budget hearing, and recent global events have opened many more eyes to the cyber threats facing our energy sector. And I can't tell you how important it is that we receive the budget justification materials so that we can actually do our job. Third, the department's efforts related to rare earths and critical minerals appear scattered and unfocused, not only with the Department of Energy, but with the other agencies that have a role to play in developing our rare earths and critical minerals here in this country. The primary endeavor seems to be the Global Clean Energy Manufacturing Initiative. This new program, though, is proposed as mandatory funding. This administration is not the first to include mandatory funding proposals within the budget request, but that doesn't change the fact that it is simply a gimmick to allow the administration to say it supports the issue without having to count the costs or make choices to incorporate it into their annual budget appropriations. Secretary Grenholm, I appreciate your being here again today, and there are many things that we agree on, some things that we have different priorities that we will love to discuss with you, and I look forward to hearing. So thank you for being here today.
Thank you very much, Ranking Member Simpson. We are all very grateful that Secretary Granholm is joining us here today, and we know that she's already had quite a jam-packed day testifying this morning in front of the Committee on Energy and Commerce, and we know how rough they are to wrestle with. We all welcome your observations of how the Department of Energy can increase energy security while confronting the climate crisis and creating more and better jobs here at home. Following a bipartisan confirmation vote, Secretary Granholm became just the second woman to lead the U.S. Department of Energy. Previously, Secretary Granholm was the first woman elected governor of Michigan, serving 2 terms from 2003 to 2011. We heard her voice in Ohio. So thank you. As governor, Jennifer Granholm faced economic downturns caused by the Great Recession and meltdown in the automotive and manufacturing sectors. She successfully led efforts to diversify the state's economy, strengthen its auto industry and give them new hope, preserve the manufacturing sector, and add emerging sectors such as clean energy to Michigan's economic portfolio. With that amazing experience, I appreciate her leadership at the Department of Energy in applying those lessons across our country. She truly understands the importance of American workers and communities at risk of being left behind and those who have endured so much. That's rare here in Washington, and I'm excited that we can work with her closely. Thank you for taking time to be here today. Without objection, your written statement will be put into the record. Please feel free to summarize your remarks, Secretary Granholm.
Thank you so much, Madam Chairwoman. So great to be here with you and to share so many similar sentiments. And Ranking Member Simpson, I'm so pleased to be here with you as well in person, and I'm grateful for the conversations that we've had. And members of the committee, so nice to see you as well. Look forward to a good conversation. I'm grateful to be able to discuss the President's 2023 budget for the Department of Energy. I'm very grateful that you've supported the department, many of you, including through the 2022 omnibus legislation, and I certainly applaud all of your work to ensure reliable and clean and affordable energy for all Americans. It's an effort I'm proud to play a part of as the 16th Secretary of Energy. Under the Biden administration, the Department of Energy is really committed to increasing energy affordability, energy resilience, energy security, and we're committed to securing the clean energy supply chains that are needed to reduce our reliance on unabated fossil fuels and increase our energy independence. So we're committed to enhancing America's competitiveness by accelerating scientific discovery and innovation, and those commitments are reflected in this budget. A look around the world shows that this is the right focus with the right priorities for this moment in history. Right now, we face a trio of crises. 1 is climate change, 2 is COVID-19's effect on supply chains, and 3 is Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The first of those crises cost the United States, climate change, $148 billion last year alone in dealing with extreme weather events. And the second 2 crises are costing American families right now as they see prices rising from gas stations to grocery stores. Let me be clear that the department is using every tool available to increase oil supply. And that's why last month, President Biden authorized the release of 1 million barrels per day from our Strategic Petroleum Reserve over the next 6 months, 180 million barrels total, coordinated with international allies and partners who also agreed to release in a coordinated fashion another 60 million barrels. And I appreciate Congress's support of President Biden's ban on Russian energy imports. We're also working to offer relief to American families, including through the $3.5 billion for the Weatherization Assistance Program that was provided in the bipartisan infrastructure law. But ultimately, these crises tell us that global security, energy independence, energy affordability all depend on a shift toward American-made clean energy. Fortunately, Congress, through the Energy Act of 2020 and the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, has invested in DOE's ability to build many of these clean energy technologies, abated fossil fuel technologies here at home with American parts and American labor. I'm grateful to the members of this committee for the faith that they have placed in our department to oversee many of these investments and the new offices and the ambitious clean energy goals that come with them. We are hard at work implementing this legislation. Most recently, for example, I know many of you are interested in this. The DOE began accepting applications for the $6 billion civilian nuclear credit program, which is going to keep existing nuclear energy online and maintain that reliable, clean source of baseload power. This $62 billion investment from the infrastructure law that flows to the Department of Energy is an historic long-term investment in projects that will serve our nation for decades. But alone, it's on its own, it's not sufficient to address the full suite of energy challenges that we face. It's why our request includes base year funding efforts to complement the infrastructure law and to maximize its impact to lower costs and to make energy secure and provide us with clean, reliable American power. The request also supports the department's innovative capacity within our Office of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy, our Office of Science, our 17 national labs, all to maintain America's competitive edge, and our budget includes, of course, funding across a range of DOE missions that have kept our country safe, from environmental management to nuclear security. So I'm proud of the DOE's work to confront our nation's most pressing challenges, and I'm excited to lead this amazing agency as we implement Congress's legislative actions, from the infrastructure law and the Energy Act to those still to come, including the Bipartisan Innovation Act, which we hope is passed, and President Biden's full agenda for building a better America. So thank you for the opportunity to be here today, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Secretary Granholm, for your statement. Let me remind all members and witnesses that the 5-minute clock still applies. And if there's a technology issue, we will move on to the next member until the issue is resolved, and you will retain the balance of your time. You'll notice a clock that will show how much time is remaining. When your time is expired, I'll begin to recognize the next member. In terms of speaking order, we will follow the order as we did in yesterday's hearing, beginning with the chair and ranking member. Then members present at the time the hearing is called to order, recognized in order of seniority, and finally, members arriving after gavel by order of arrival. Additional rounds of questions may occur after all members have an opportunity for a first round. We will now begin questioning under our normal rules. Madam Secretary, I'm very happy that you referenced the bipartisan infrastructure legislation and the energy title and the $62 billion in the energy title. I just have a comment there. You don't have to react, but I think in many communities, when they think about the infrastructure bill, they think about bridges and they think about roads. I would venture to say there are a whole lot of leaders in our country at the local level who don't even know that energy is a part of that bill. I don't know what structure you have at the Department of Energy, but I would urge you to consider a team of people who could speak on Zoom, for example, with local communities that aren't as connected to the federal government. They don't have labs, they don't have big bases, they don't have officials who have ever dealt with the Department of Energy in any major way, and yet they would benefit enormously by being able to modernize their energy platform and take advantage of some of the provisions that exist in the bill. So I just wanted to put that on the table as what I consider unfinished work for the country. And if the department could meet the street more effectively, I really do think it would be a very important set of discussions to have. The question I wanted to deal with first is hydrogen. Now, we know how important hydrogen is to our future, and it can be made from a diverse set of sources, domestic resources, and used in a way to decarbonize sectors. So this gives hydrogen the enormous potential to increase our energy security, save consumers money, and reduce carbon pollution. I was a couple minutes late even getting here because one of the members of Congress asked me if I couldn't set up a special briefing just on hydrogen. In our region of the Great Lakes, we have the ability to produce hydrogen off nuclear and solar and have strong regional demand for low carbon hydrogen with all of our manufacturing, obviously. I've met with so many of our automotive companies, and when I say, what can I do to keep your production here, their first answer is cut our energy costs by a third. So America has to move in that direction. So my question really is, how is the department approaching this potential for the expansion of the hydrogen economy, and how can that be supported on a regional basis? And I have an open invitation to you anytime maybe you're driving back to Michigan to come to the Upper Great Lakes to visit our region where we are trying to be relevant in this space, but frankly don't have a lot of experience among some sectors of our economy and even knowing how to embrace it.
Thank you. I don't think there's a lot of areas of the country, there are maybe a couple who have experience with hydrogen, but this is a whole new opportunity for all of your communities. These hydrogen hubs, thank you for those of you who supported the bipartisan infrastructure law. It is going to provide $8 billion to create a series of hydrogen hubs across the country. Those could be affiliate, and we want them to be centers of hydrogen economies, local hydrogen economies around the country. We see it as a huge economic opportunity in addition to an energy and climate solution. Every country that I have met with, where my counterpart, everybody's looking for this solution because it is clean, dispatchable baseload power. And so whether it's nuclear or natural gas, coupled perhaps with carbon capture, whether it is renewable energy, there's so much potential for communities to be able to benefit from this. So we've issued two requests for information, and we're now sifting through about 5,000 pages that we've received from local communities across the country who want to form collaborations to be able to create a hydrogen hub. And that might be a collaboration between states, it might be a collaboration between regions, it might be an industrial decarbonization hydrogen play where you've got a business collection that are interested in decarbonizing using hydrogen. So it's a very exciting opportunity. We will be issuing funding opportunity announcement once we have finished sifting through all of the feedback that we have received, and we hope to have over a couple of years a series of announcements regarding hydrogen from that bipartisan infrastructure law. Hopefully, I know it's 4 are required, but I think that there could be many more. It will require a match from industry, and so getting that partnership is a lot of what local communities are working on now, and there may be anchor businesses that are most likely to be able to partner on it.
All right, I wanted to say this for the record, and I don't want to bore my colleagues, but this is my moment, so I'm going to take it. I probably represent one of the heaviest industrial platforms in the country that spans the southern rim of Lake Erie. It includes the major Stellantis Jeep platform, the largest on the continent, making the most popular vehicle, the Wrangler, and other products as well. We have major automotive companies, General Motors. We have steel companies like Cleveland-Cliffs, now a $20 billion company that bought ArcelorMittal. We have the largest heavy truck facility at Avon Lake, Ford. And just south of my district, we have the Lima Tank Plant, which makes the M1A2 and other equipment for the U.S. military. We are a very heavy industrial user. We have the rebirth of the greenhouse industry in our area, where Canadian companies are moving south, Mucci, Nature Fresh, 200-acre greenhouses to displace where fruits and vegetables are not being grown because of the lack of water. 40% of their bottom line is energy. I keep looking at my region and thinking, what do I do on energy? What do I do in order to make these companies more competitive? And I believe people should work for a living wage, and they work hard in each of these industries. So I don't know what the Department of Energy can do to look at different areas of the country that have special needs, but having come from Michigan, you know the power requirements of these places. And I'm hoping you might consider identifying some of these heavy industrial regions, looking at the infrastructure bill and the Department of Energy bill, and thinking about a new energy future that's attendant to these places. New circuitry, where do we put it? How do we interlink power, the movement of power across these regions? Under the kind of international competition that they face. So I just put that on the table. I don't know if the DOE has the capacity to do that, but I can definitely tell you it's needed in regions like my own. Yes, I'm going to go to the ranking member, Mr. Simpson, now.
Thank you. Again, thank you for being here today. I know you've only been with the federal government now for, what, a year and 4 months or something like that. I've come to understand, as I'm sure Chairwoman Chapter and Congressman Calvert that have been here for a number of years, how things work. So I'm going to give you this hint. In the House, we do our job. We actually pass appropriation bills. We work together with a minority and majority and get a bill passed, and then we wait and wait and wait for the body across the rotunda to do anything. I don't care what, just do anything. And consequently, that leads us to doing omnibuses halfway through the fiscal year, which is no way to run a railroad, and especially no way to run the federal government. And my goal, one of my goals in life is to live long enough to actually see Congress finish their appropriation bills on time, because I'm like 85% sure of when October 1st comes. I know it's going to be between like September 30th and October 2nd. And you would think we would be able to do our bills on time. But for some reason, we haven't done that since 1994, I think was the last year. That's got to change. But I want to tell you that in this committee and the Appropriations Committee in the House in general, I think we work together in a good bipartisan fashion trying to get these bills done, taking into consideration each other's goals. But one of the keys, as I mentioned in my opening statement, for us to be able to do our job is to get the information we need. You're not the first secretary that I've told this to. I've told it to every single secretary that we've had before us, is that our key to getting our job done is to make sure that we get the budget justifications and other information that we ask for. It's not so that we can criticize you or anything else. It's so that we have that information so that we can make solid decisions when we're putting together the budget. So anything that you can do to make sure that that happens would certainly be appreciated by this committee.
Yes, I completely understand. I know you
Having been a governor, you understand this
I
entirely.
completely understand.
Yeah. Previously, the Department of Energy has warned that the U.S. energy sector faces imminent danger from cyber attacks, and those attacks are growing more frequent and sophisticated. Electric utilities and energy companies have started sharing information with each other and with the government. The DOE has led the way in this area, but the industry is large and diverse. How vulnerable is the U.S. energy sector, and can technologies reduce the inherent vulnerabilities of the U.S. energy sector? How does the budget request address those vulnerabilities, and has the DOE estimated the potential impact, the economic impact of a successful widespread attack on the U.S. energy sector?
Okay. So yes, we completely agree that this is an important area to focus on. CSER, of course, which is the agency responsible for it, has seen there's a bit of an increase for them, but they've really been focused on this shields up posture in light of the fact that we are on a war footing with Russia, and of course China has been a concern. So we have CSER has a very strong relationship with utilities, with the private sector, to ensure that we have a two-way conversation, but it is super tight. And that means that many in the utility sector have agreed to put our technology on their system so that we can listen and follow when there is an attack or when there is any irregularity, and then we can share it with the rest of the system, because obviously what happens to one could happen to the other. It is very instantaneous. We feel very good about it. CSER has been excellent in putting out grants for designing smart grids, for designing for the future. The technologies associated with the grid can become, should create a grid that is very responsive to other parts of the country so that you can move electrons around where they are needed. Technology is continuing to advance. It's one of the reasons why part of the increase for the energy efficiency and renewable energy part of our office is on their grid initiative to do the research necessary for the next generation of technologies to ensure that the grid is resilient, that the grid resilient from extreme weather events, but also resilient from cyber. And so those pieces of technology, and they work very closely together, both CSER and EERE, to make sure that the grid is resilient, especially because we are looking to expand the grid because we've got a lot more capacity that we have to add.
Thank you for that, and I appreciate that. As you know from our conversations in the past and from this, that I am very interested in cybersecurity. And while we all are concerned and worried about a nuclear attack and stuff like that, the reality is we would know where that came from, and there would be an immediate response. The problem is with cybersecurity, we have no idea where that attack is going to come from, and it can happen and cause huge impacts to our economy and so forth. So I think this is really an area in the future that I think government-wide we need to take more seriously and invest more money in trying to prevent those types of attacks. So appreciate it. Yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Simpson. Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Secretary, it's good to see you. I hail from the Sunshine State, as you know, so you will not be surprised at the theme of my question, which is around solar energy. Solar energy is incredibly important to my state, and it was really disturbing. I'm sure you shared the concern that our state legislature this past session passed a bill that would actually disincentivize, or would have disincentivized, residential solar installation by substantially cutting back on net metering. And thankfully, Governor DeSantis, and I don't use those few words in a sentence very often, but thankfully Governor DeSantis, who was pressured heavily into vetoing the bill, did so yesterday, and thanks to the tireless advocacy of progressive groups. But independent analysts are currently projecting that the rate of residential rooftop solar installations will fall for the first time ever. So, and that's not just in Florida, it's across the whole country. And that obviously jeopardizes our efforts to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So my question is would you support having DOE examine the reasons, causes, and what Congress can do to help improve installation rates?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
it sounds like you might not have known that solar has actually...
I'm wondering if that was as a result of the action, the administrative action that's happening at Commerce. Is that why? Because are you familiar with that?
No.
There's an administrative action which one or two solar manufacturers in the United States brought, which essentially has put on hold the shipments of solar panels into the United States. And that has been a source of great concern because of the expectations that it will significantly reduce the amount of solar.
But
the bottom line is...
installations have actually dropped.
Yeah.
So that might precipitate...
Oh, I see what you mean. They already have.
already dropped, right.
No, we need to increase. I mean, a lot of this is state action. You're right about that. To incentivize net metering is one important way of doing it. I will say the other part of this is that we've got to manufacture the full supply chain in the United States. I mean, Chairwoman Capter is lucky to have a really important solar footprint in her state. We need to have that everywhere so people feel that what they're manufacturing and what they can put on the roof and how much money they can save, because it is, in many places, the cheapest form of energy.
No, absolutely. And speaking of that infrastructure need, our state punches far below our weight class in Florida when it comes to solar energy. It's really counterintuitive, but we have the capacity for so much more solar than we generate. And the infrastructure law appropriated a few activities for the Solar Energy Technologies Office. So can you talk about what kind of work and the new initiatives that will be generated by that office in 23?
Yeah, one of the big pieces of it is a solar manufacturing accelerator, because part of
music
it,
to my ears.
Yes, I mean, part of it is that the manufacturing of solar right now, especially because we rely on silicon in many places and we get that silicon and those panels from China, we have got to be building out that full supply chain here. And we've also got to be looking beyond silicon. What are the next generation technologies that we should, what will make them more efficient? What are the perovskites? What are the technologies, the IT components of solar that we should be enhancing and accelerating? What about the racking and tracking systems? How can we make those more efficient? How can we do it how can we embed next generation technologies into building materials so that you can't even tell that you have solar panels on your roof when you buy your house? So those kinds of technologies are part of the increase that we've asked for the Solar Technologies Office and the Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy Office.
Thank you. And so hopefully between that office and a potential to examine the causes of the declines in installation rates, then we can really ramp up and use solar in much more significant ways to address greenhouse gases. And then just very quickly, can you talk about the EERE restructuring? I know that we obviously need to invest significantly in EERE, and it's critical for the climate crisis fight. My district in South Florida, it's a right now thing, not a someday thing. So just would love to hear what you're...
Yeah, I mean, first of all, the Department of Energy was set up initially to really focus on the labs, research, development, a bit of demonstration, but not much deployment. So what the bipartisan infrastructure law has enabled us to do is to really exercise the muscle of deployment, taking these technologies that we've been doing research on for years and getting them out into the states and the cities. And so EERE has been a critical component of doing the research for clean energy technologies. And they will continue to do that. There are components, though, of EERE that have moved over, for example, the Weatherization Assistance Program, to the deployment side, because that really is where a DOE meets the street, as the chairwoman has said, is through weatherization. And so we want to make sure that the deployment side, the demonstration side, the outward-facing side, have all of the offices in it that are relevant to that. And EERE is now going to double down and focus on the technology side, part of which I just talked about. They are focused on sustainable aviation fuels, for example, next generation biofuels, huge emphasis on the research associated with that and the grand challenge that has been put out to the private sector to meet the goal of getting 100% sustainable aviation fuels by 2050. They're focused on next generation wind. I mean, wind has been so underfunded over the years, and now we are going to have this big offshore wind push like Europe has, which is close to, I mean, it's not 100%, but it gets close to baseload clean power if you do it right. But if we're going to have it along the Atlantic and parts of the Pacific as well, there's a lot of research and a lot of work that has to go on the on the R&D side to make sure that that works, including planning and technical assistance and all of that. So EERE has been, the reason why we have boosted it is to really help be complementary to what is happening on the deployment and demonstration side of things. So now both wings of our aircraft are more evenly balanced.
Thank you. I yield back the time I don't have.
I'm so
You
sorry.
always do very well, very well. Oh, dear Ken Calvert. Okay, Congressman Calvert.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Secretary, welcome. Thank you for being here today. As you know, I also serve as the ranking member on Defense Appropriations. So department's stockpile stewardship and weapons modernization programs are important to me and also to our country. Admiral Richard from STRATCOM testified before the Defense Subcommittee several weeks ago and sounded serious alarm bells about the state of our nuclear infrastructure. The Department of Defense is concerned that there remain several single points of failure that need to be resolved very quickly. For example, it's been clear that we will not get to 80 pets per year by 2030. With all these challenges, after billions in new funding from the infrastructure bill for your department's non-defense programs, I'm disappointed that you're requesting a mere 3.7% increase for NNSA compared to 17% in non-defense. I might point out the core inflation rate this year will probably be about 6.5%. That's a hefty cut when you account for inflation. I'm not sure how anyone can justify shortcoming our national security, especially now, as dangerous regimes challenge the international order. I might point out the Russian military doctrine allows for the use of tactical nuclear weapons, which they have developed and can continue to develop. And the Chinese are continuing to develop more and more weapons which they're not supposed to make, but they are anyway. Now we know that some of these key modernization milestones are out of reach. Can you describe what contingency plan the department has in place? In other words, Plan A doesn't seem to be deliverable. What is Plan B to achieve a modern and effective nuclear deterrent?
Thank you for that. Let me just let me respond directly to the pit question that you have, which is very important. We know that the two sites are important. Los Alamos is on track to complete their 30 pits per year. As we know, we're working on redesigning this MOX facility at Oak Ridge, and we want to make sure that it is done well and right. Part of the delay, I think, may have to do a bit with COVID, with design issues, but now our highest priority is making sure the infrastructure exists, and it exists in a way to be able to safely produce the 50 pits. We don't know exactly when that will be, but they are pushing to get it as close to 2030 as possible. It is a priority.
Well, that was my question, was what is that timeline? Nobody seems to know.
Well, I know they're looking at it one more time to be able to come up with the next estimate. I don't have that in front of me right now because I think that process is ongoing, but they understand the urgency with which this must happen, and they also understand we've got to do it in the right way so that we don't find ourselves in a position of having made a mistake.
Well, in your budget request, it includes a 7% increasing for staffing at NSA. How many full-time employees would this funding support? And can you provide the subcommittee with a detailed breakdown of job functions of these new employees?
I will provide that in writing.
And has the department maximized the modernization work that can be undertaken simultaneously? If not, what more can be done, and what resources will that require?
Yeah, I mean, we've asked for the resources we think are important. Clearly, the NNSA's got two very important missions. One is to make sure that we are modernizing the weapons that are in our strategy, and the second is making sure that the infrastructure associated with the production or the modernization of those weapons are up to snuff. And so both are critical. Both require staff of significant expertise. We have had some attrition in the NNSA staff. They have increased the salary rates of contractors to be able to maintain the workforce, which was well received earlier in February. But there's more work to be done there for sure.
Well, you put out a video in January announcing the largest staff increase expansion in the department's history. How many of those 1,000 or so employees will support NNSA's nuclear modernization program?
Those employees are for the bipartisan infrastructure law.
So none.
Right.
Okay, thank you. I reel back.
Congressman Kilmer?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Secretary Granholm. It's great to see you again. As always, excited to invite you to the Pacific Northwest National Lab in Sequim, Washington. We would look forward to hosting you. And that's one of the questions I want to start off with. I am proud to have the department's only marine and coastal research lab in my district in Sequim. They are important contributors to our local economy and community. Unfortunately, a lot of the facilities at the lab are aging and in need of some new investments to fully realize the potential of oceans and coastal communities to support our decarbonized future. With the department's only hybrid boat expected at the lab next year, thanks to support from the Water Power Technologies Office, the lab needs some basic investments in new dock and waterside infrastructure to fully leverage that new capability and accelerate innovation in the blue economy. So while I'm glad to see the request would provide an increase from the Water Power Office, more is needed, and I'm certainly going to be pushing for that in this year's appropriations process. So here's my question. If Congress provides some additional funding for this office, can we get your commitment to invest in the infrastructure we need, certainly at Sequim, but also elsewhere, to leverage oceans and waterways to realize our decarbonized future?
Absolutely. I'm with you on the power of water, or the potential of it, and water power. So we would love to work together on it.
Super. And along those lines, beyond the Water Power Technologies Office, the department is doing a lot of critically important work that cuts across offices to leverage the blue economy. whether it's marine energy technology, floating solar, marine carbon removal technologies, and so much more. There are huge opportunities for our oceans and waterways to contribute to a clean energy future. My colleague on this subcommittee, Dan Newhouse, and I introduced a bill, HR 6680, the Blue Energy Innovation Act, to establish and fund some of these cross-cutting efforts that look at the common challenges in aquatic environments. I'm hoping that this bill will be enacted as part of the Bipartisan Innovation Act that Congress is currently debating, but also hope that we can get your commitment to work with us through the regular appropriations process to establish that kind of coordinated cross-cutting effort as soon as possible. And as we do so, we'd love to hear your thoughts on additional areas where DOE can do more to leverage our oceans for the clean energy future. And again, I think seeing the work on the blue economy firsthand would be worthwhile. So we'd love to invite you to come see us.
Thank you so much, and I really do look forward to coming there to swim and seeing it. And yes, would love to work with you on this. I think that you may have been talking to some folks on our team. There's one other element that I would just put out there from the Water Energy Nexus, which is that we have funded an initiative related to water and energy. A lot of it, the technology is associated with making sure that we are capturing the power of water, but also using things like the ocean to be able to provide a solution to drought, et cetera, through maybe desalination. So there's a lot of different potential technologies that would fall under that, and I'm super excited about using marine technology, in particular, the power of waves.
We'd love to work with your team in that regard. With the little bit of time I have left, I'd be remiss not to mention some concerns from across the other side of my state, and my guess is Mr. Newhouse may raise this too, regarding the Hanford nuclear reservation cleanup. As you know, Hanford was part of the Manhattan Project and produced plutonium during World War II and the Cold War period. Today, over 50 square miles of groundwater are contaminated above federal standards. 300 buildings are contaminated. There are over 10,000 stored waste containers and more at the site. I'm concerned that we need funding above the president's budget request to put us on the needed timeline for cleanup and remediation of the site, especially as we enter the next phase of treating tank waste. Just wanted to raise that issue. Look forward to working with you and with this committee to ensure that there's adequate resources, because we can't leave that region vulnerable to aging and failing infrastructure, and got to make sure we're taking care of the families that live there and the farms and the fish and others that are counting on us here. So I just wanted to raise that issue as well.
Great. I agree with you 100%, and I look forward to meeting with you there hopefully in the next few months.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I see my time's nearly out. I yield back. And again, thank you, Madam Secretary, for being with us.
Thank you. Congressman Fleischman.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Ranking Member Simpson. Madam Secretary, thank you very much for being with us today. I so appreciate your kindness, your visit not only to Oak Ridge to see our great reservation where we have about $7.2 billion worth of federal investment in key DOE missions, but also for coming to the greatest mid-sized city in America right after that, Chattanooga. So I feel very privileged and very spoiled. So thank you for your kind visits, and I look forward to working with you. I've got several questions. As you know, I represent the 3rd District of Tennessee. I stay immersed in this portfolio. So I'm going to begin with a key question on the issue of reprocessing. You know, some people call it recycling, others reprocessing. America's got the world's largest inventory of used nuclear fuel, apparently 86,000 metric tons scattered at some 75 sites in 35 states. And this used nuclear fuel represents a valid security threat from sabotage to a lot of other things. It's very high cost to guard. And earlier this year, I applaud the department. The department reached out for help, said, request for assistance, come up with ideas. And we're getting ideas from industry, from some of the affected states. This is really not a partisan issue. It's a very serious issue that we're dealing with, and I deal with this with the Nuclear Cleanup Caucus. My question is, in light of the yucca status from the previous administration and this administration, which have been consistent in that regard, my question is, Do you have an opinion on leveraging nuclear recycling or reprocessing to close the fuel cycle? And what is your thoughts about reprocessing them?
Yeah, I think, we are the solutions department, right? We are open to all manner of solutions. There are other places that do reprocess that, and we can learn from them. I know that there is research going on in our nuclear energy lab and in some spaces within the department. I do think that if we can recycle, if you will, in a safe way and in a cost-effective way, then it makes certainly sense to do so, and I rely upon the scientists to tell us how we can get there. I also think that we've got an awful lot of nuclear waste, and we have to dispose of it. You mentioned yucca. We have to dispose of it in a responsible way, or store it in a responsible way, and of course, that's our Blue Ribbon Commission and the nuclear consent-based nuclear siting process that the Department of Energy and the Nuclear Energy Office is undertaking.
Great. And just one follow-up point. It does get called waste. I think that might be a little bit of a misnomer. These are really just used fuel that could be recycled and used again. And that's just part of the semantics of this issue. Moving forward, manufacturing housing is near and dear to me. Over the years, this is something that I've seen, especially with the cost of existing conventional site-based housing. Manufacturing housing gives families an opportunity to get in at an entry level. I think it's great. Section 413, Madam Secretary, of the Energy Independence and Security Act requires the department to develop energy efficiency standards. The statute says that DOE should use the code, except if it's not cost-effective, comparing the energy savings to increased costs to the homeowner. DOE's cost-benefit analysis right now is at best incomplete in that it did not include, Madam Secretary, testing, compliance, and enforcement. So I'm going to ask you to please look at this. This is an issue that is not necessarily front and center, but it affects so many poorer Americans in terms of being able to get into these homes. So I'm going to defer to you to look at that and perhaps work with us to resolve some of those issues. I know my time is waning, so I've got a couple of other questions. The Office of Science is truly incredible. As you know, it funds our national labs. It's the largest funder of physical sciences and that are essential to the discovery of energy transitions. It's just truly amazing. We've had record funding there, but it's been brought to my attention by our national labs, particularly our friends in Oak Ridge, that the construction and operation facilities have not kept up with that funding. So the best ideas in the world are getting funding and promoted at our national labs, but there is a lag in the construction and operations funding to go with that. I wanted to please bring that to your attention and just ask that you would work with us on that.
Absolutely. And
then finally, an issue that I think kudos go to not only TDEC in our state, but also to Ike White and Deputy Secretary Turk working with me, as other administrations have, for the disposal cell at Oak Ridge. We're taking down legacy buildings. At the lab alone, there's over 75. The current cell will be filled up by probably 2027, maybe 2028. We need to get that built. I've spoken with the EPA. I believe they're acting in earnest. They've showed that. Again, your department has worked well with us. We're all working together, and I would just ask for your assistance to continue to work with EPA that we can get a decision so that we can get that cell built. If we don't get the cell built, we can't do legacy cleanup.
Right. I think you're probably aware that they had some very positive movement on potentially getting an agreement on that. I think I quite may have shared that with you, and so we're very hopeful and look forward to working with you on it too.
Thank you. And Madam Secretary, I yield back.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fleischman. Congresswoman Bonnie Watson-Coleman.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Secretary. I appreciate your presentation for us today. I'm really pleased to see earlier in the month that the DOE released a new equity action plan focusing on investing in HBCU opportunities in clean energy, and I'm hopeful that these initiatives will eliminate barriers to access in STEM education. However, diversity within our national laboratories and other research agencies is still lacking. Across 17 of the national laboratories, of the 242 people in senior leadership position, only 24 are from underrepresented minorities. I'd like to know how this budget would support diversity and how you would envision this budget being supportive of increasing and encouraging diversity in these areas.
Yeah,
In recruiting as well as hiring.
I'm sorry. Thank you for that question. Really important question, especially since we have got to increase, to be able to benefit from the wisdom of all communities. We have to increase STEM leadership in all communities and education in all communities. So we have a pipeline that really looks like and represents America. So we are doing a number of things. First is that our own house is focused on making sure that the hiring that we're doing reflects the diverse country that we are. Second, the labs themselves and the sites are doing an amazing job of, they have taken on this charge. And so, for example, I was recently with Representative Clyburn at the Savannah River site, and he had pulled together all of the HBCUs and MSIs to be able to say to them, hey, look, the site is going to hire your people. If you train them in the right way for those apprenticeships, they'll be paid there. And now there's a pipeline and a relationship and MOUs with all of those entities. So we brought that model to the labs. They are increasing their funding for STEM recruitment and STEM education to be able to have us all benefit from it. So both inside the department for basic hiring since I've been there, for the climate energy core that we are recruiting, and for what the labs are doing, all very important. Our environmental management team is putting in this budget a significant commitment toward communities that are environmental justice communities, and making sure that they too are at the table and that we are doing right by them and listening. And this is going to be true with the grants that go out from the funding opportunity announcements from the bipartisan infrastructure law, is that we want to make sure that we are addressing Justice 40, and that 40% of the benefits of this funding go to communities that have been at the back of the pack, and that we are able to rectify some of the the inequities that have been embedded over time. So we're all in on this.
Madam Secretary, that is music to my ears. Thank you for that. I am incredibly proud also that Princeton Plasma Physics Lab is located in my district. I know that there was a fusion summit at the White House today. I also know that the Deputy Secretary, Mr. Turk, with the representatives from the White House, were able to tour PPPL earlier. I'm wondering, what are the next steps in the development of that vision as it relates to fusion? Will the administration support and prioritize the funding necessary to accelerate the development of fusion energy? And how is that reflected in this 2023 budget request?
Yes, thank you for that. Obviously, the Princeton Plasma Fusion Lab is one of the key entities that's doing this. The National Ignition Facility at LBNL, a number of labs are doing incredibly important work in fusion. The Office of Science has about $723 million for fusion in this budget, including the investment at Eere, our international cooperation with a number of countries that's located in France. We have a real push on this, both from the administration as well as inside. We know that there's a decadal strategy with respect to the administration having brought together folks to be able to do that. Congressman Fleischman, thank you for participating in that as well. So this, I know everybody says it's far out, but if you keep saying that and you don't put enough to make it come closer, this could be it certainly could be an answer to all of our desires to get clean base load power.
I have 11 seconds, so thank you for that. I just want to say this. New Jersey, with its shoreline, is very interested in capitalizing on wind energy offshore. And we hope that you all can recognize that we're trying to be a leader in that area. We are a leader in that area. and there will be the appropriate resources and support to those efforts to make sure that we meet even our governor's ambitious goal of 7,500 megawatts by 2035. It's so important to all of us, and connecting that wind energy to our energy grid is what we need attention on. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. I was in New Jersey yesterday on that very subject, so yes, agree 100%.
Oh, sorry I missed you.
No, no,
Whoopi,
it's all
thank you. I yield back.
Thank you very much, Congresswoman Coleman. Congressman Newhouse.
Oh, thank you very much, Madam Chair. Madam Secretary, great to see you.
Great to see you,
Thank
too.
you for being with us. And let me start off by saying thank you for meeting with the Western Caucus earlier this year, having a great conversation about many of the energy concerns of members of the Western Caucus and their constituents, and just really appreciate you coming, sitting down with us for lunch and hearing our concerns. So thank you for that. Couple things. First, I wanted to start off with something called the Tri-Cities Clean Energy Innovation Hub. And when you come to my district, you will see that firsthand. But as you know, at DOE sites across the country, we really have an incredibly unique set of skilled workers capable of supporting a wide variety of national priorities, including clean energy and technology and development and deployment. It's nowhere better illustrated than in the Tri-Cities in Washington State. We certainly have a dedicated team of local businesses, governments, utilities, community organizations. They've all been working to continually grow the clean energy innovation as a hub in the Tri-Cities. And I think I believe, even briefed some of your senior staff members. So I think there's really a tremendous opportunity here for collaboration between DOE and the Tri-Cities. And when you do come to Hanford, we're going to reschedule that, I hope, and meet with folks there and with the Pacific Northwest National Laboratory, that you will also take some time to meet with these folks and hear about their great work and things they're doing to work on clean energy goals. That'd be exciting. But jumping to Hanford, I want to compliment Mr. Kilmer for reading word for word exactly what I wrote for him. It was awesome. But talking about the needs that we have cleaning up the Hanford site, and given those current needs that he mentioned, and I'm referencing my question, and then I'll get into some other things before I ask for your responses. It's just simple. Why would the administration propose cutting funds for Hanford for fiscal year 23 by $172 million? It seems that we should be doing that would only move us further away from the successful completion of that cleanup. You know, I think it was last summer, last June perhaps, my colleague Senator Murray shared with you her serious concerns with the life cycle costs of the Hanford project, and asked if you thought that there were opportunities to lower them. And your response was that you didn't have a silver bullet, and I appreciate that. But I have to say that I think there are some important innovative solutions that we do have to accomplish this goal. So 3 things. First, utilizing the high-level waste reclassification, which I was encouraged to see your department affirm and utilize at other sites around the country. So thank you very much for doing that. Secondly, continuing our deployment of the low-level waste off-site disposal, or the test bed initiative. I'm sure you're familiar with that. We must move forward with a second stage. And lastly, on a more general matter, the current regulatory regime governing the site's cleanup. We've got to continue encouraging a proactive engagement and a partnership between the DOE and my state, the state of Washington, to really make true progress for the cleanup. So just curious about your thoughts of all of that.
Yeah, I mean, I look forward to coming as well. And again, I apologize that trip had to be canceled, because I think there is no substitute for being there in person to see the site and to meet with people and businesses, et cetera, who are moving the clean energy.
As long as no more
space
wars
first.
break out, we'll get you there. Right?
Yeah, yes, thank you. You know, the funding issue is just a tough one, right? Because the EM's budget is 7.6 billion, and 2.5 billion of that goes to Hanford. There is no doubt that there's greater needs than that, and really, I look forward to working with you on it. This is a question of balancing across budgets and across sites. I am. You know, I know that you're, you know, Ike White, who's head of our EM office, who's done just a phenomenal job at all of these sites. And he's trying to balance it all as well. You know, they've been able to achieve some milestones where they come in under budget and ahead of time. For example, the side tank cesium, you know, was the tank side cesium removal system was ahead of time.
We call it TISCR, just for short.
TISCR. But, you know, and we're excited about the start of DFLAW. You know, so I want to see it in person, though, personally, and I would love to talk through with you other ways we could consider how we can be efficient, but you know, low cost but safe, and address the community's concerns. All of those balance in, and we obviously want to partner with Washington. We will continue. We must partner with Washington in terms of the definition of the waste, and whether it's you know, whether we use the definition of high-level waste that we've used in other places or not. That's obviously part of the discussions that we are having.
Yep, thank you. Thank you very much for that. And Madam Chair, I know I'm over time, but could I just make one point here that the Secretary and I think their report earlier this year on the life cycle cost of Hanford came up with potentially a total cost of $640 billion with a completion date somewhere near 2078. And just, we get 2.5 or approximately a year. In order to meet that, it would be $11 billion a year, just to put that in perspective. So we need that silver bullet, some of those things that we're talking about. We really do. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to state that because votes have been called, members should just be aware of that. What we are going to do is we're going to continue the hearing, and one of our colleagues will come and take the gavel as I go vote, and then we'll come back. So I just wanted to make members aware. Congresswoman Herrera Butler.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, Madam Secretary, for being with us today. I wanted to talk about gas prices, which I'm sure you're acutely aware of. The average price of gas is $4.68 in a gallon in Washington State. And in Southwest Washington, which is my home, not everybody can afford to drive a Tesla, although I'm sure it would be fun to get the chance. I actually have a small business in my district recently who they're now downsizing their business because they can't afford the cost of gas on top of labor and on top of maintenance, et cetera. And prior to this administration, we had the ability to be energy independent. But I feel like a rush to rather than a rainbow of energy options, we chose the green energy options only. I mean, I should say almost singularly. And my concern is it's not going to happen overnight. And as a result, it really has driven up prices across the board. And let's be clear, gas prices were climbing prior to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. That obviously doesn't help the situation. I wanted to know really what steps the administration is taking on this piece, because as much as we know there are many, many things happening, the main things that people are asking me about are these prices, because it really impacts whether they can do what they need to do for their families. And I know that's important to you. I think a lot of us would agree that there is nothing. I am fully in support of the goals to get electric vehicles on the road and moving, but I'm having a real challenge with, on one hand, it's let's plug every car in. On the other hand, we don't even know what the capacity in Washington State. We don't even know what our need is. I know that we came within 500 megawatts of brownouts last year. Yet the direction of our state is we can't even tell you what our need is and where our need is at. Yet we're talking about getting rid of load generating energy production in favor of things that are good, but I don't think are there yet to generate for the load. And so I wanted to hear you speak about that a little bit.
Thanks for the question, because it is clearly just hugely acute for everyone, but particularly for people of moderate means. I mean, it is a huge burden. The president's obsessed with this as well. As you know, oil is traded on a global market. And that global market, unfortunately, has had now between 1.5 to 2 million barrels per day pulled off of it because of the Russian invasion. And yes, the prices were rising because we were coming out of COVID and the demand was increasing and the supply was not keeping up with demand. This is all about supply and demand always, right? But right now, people think often that a governor, I say this because this was always a question I got when prices went up, why can't you lower gas prices? Yeah. But the fact is, it is traded on a global market. People in Europe, people in Brazil, everybody's paying that same $100 to $110 per barrel. And so what do we do about that? So what the president has done is increased the barrels from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve while calling upon an increase. And so just with respect, it's not a one only. I mean, the president understands that this is an acute moment. We have to increase supply. And that means we have to increase supply at home. We now are the #1 producer of oil, of gas, of oil and gas. We are the #1 producer of natural gas. We are the #1 exporter of natural gas. We are a net oil exporter. So all of that is happening right now. He is calling upon that increase. And so there's starting to be an increase in production, and the Energy Information Agency suggests that about a million barrels per day will come online additionally by the end of this year. And that's why the Strategic Petroleum Reserve was set up to meet 1 million barrels per day to the end of this year so we can stabilize. It doesn't bring down prices, though. And that's why the transition ultimately, and you're right, it's a transition. It's not going to happen overnight.
That piece is so incredibly important because if we get it wrong, we completely seize up the economy. And my fears we're going to get it wrong. The president was in Washington State last week on Earth Day, and his main focus wasn't natural gas, and he wasn't talking to the state lawmakers or the governor about the need to make sure that we don't rip out, which essentially they're trying to ban this important piece of energy. It was we're gonna further restrict your ability to make our federal forests safe from major beetle infestation and wildfire. It was we're gonna say you can pull out less trees. Right now we're not even taking enough trees off to keep the mortality in check. So I feel like though he understands that piece, it's not where the administration is moving. And I guess I would encourage you, and some of it is these are state level decisions. You know, if I hear you saying this about oil and natural gas, yet I can tell you Washington State is not singing that tune and our people are gonna pay for it. So I guess maybe some of that cross-pollination of ideas would be incredibly helpful to the people that we all serve.
I appreciate you saying that. I will say, even though that was Earth Day, it might have been a slightly different message. The president has really called upon increased supply because he understands the importance of helping our allies at this moment. You know, we at the DOE permitted 2 additional natural gas facilities yesterday. We have permitted every terminal request inside the United States that there is a permit for. We've permitted 30 billion additional cubic feet of natural gas than what currently is being even built. So we are moving in that direction because we know that at the moment we've got to increase supply even as we transition to clean energy. We have to accelerate the transition to clean, but we also have to accelerate the supply right now.
Thank you for that, Madam Chair. Madam.
Sorry, that went on a long time.
Please just call me Derek.
There you are.
Next up, Mr. Reschenthaler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and it's good to see you with the gavel, just like ModCom. Madam Secretary, you were talking with my colleague just now about supply and demand and about how, of course, we are a large producer of hydrocarbons. I'm still concerned, though, about pipelines. For example, there's some in the industry that say that we can only move roughly a quarter of the hydrocarbons we can actually produce. So given the fact that we have a shortage of pipelines, that the administration canceled the Keystone XL pipeline, that you have New York, again, I understand this is a state issue, but preventing a pipeline from Pittsburgh to Boston, which would prevent dirty Russian oil coming into New England for fuel. Despite that, it seems like the administration is against the expansion of pipelines. I know you said, and I quote you, pipe is the best way to go. You were referring to hydrocarbons. Do you still have that opinion? And also, how do you reconcile the difference between your opinion and that of the administration?
Well, I think here's what I know. We're going to need pipelines, for example, to sequester carbon. If we do these demonstration projects for carbon capture and sequestration in the bipartisan energy bill, and it's an important aspect of decarbonizing the existing fossil fuel. So we have to have pipelines. We have to have pipelines for hydrogen. We have to make pipelines that we build perhaps hydrogen ready even, and there are ways to do that. This is what they're contemplating in Europe as well. So this is an important conversation. I know that folks, in the environmental movement, understandably don't want to build out infrastructure that ends up locking people into dirty fossils. And so the question is, how do you increase supply right now, make sure that we're able to be energy independent, make sure we're able to help our allies, and not permanently lock in an infrastructure which will be harmful to, over the long run, and in the immediate, to the planet. And that is a technology question to me. That is something that we at the Department of Energy can be helpful in trying to figure out. Obviously, pipelines are not permitted by the Department of Energy, but I do think that there are technology solutions that will lead us to be more moving in the direction of clean and be able to do supply right now.
I still think we've artificially reduced our supply just by not bringing more pipelines in. I get what you're saying, but I truly think that we would reduce energy costs if we had more pipelines. Additionally, if we're looking at global CO2 emissions and projecting power abroad, we'd be in a much better position if we had more pipelines to get natural gas and other hydrocarbons to port so we can export LNG to our allies. But I have a few more questions. So, Madam Secretary, last year you said to the oil and gas industry, and I quote you, the bottom line is you have got to move. You cannot hang on and be like Kodak or the blockbuster videos of the energy world. You have got to diversify. The administration now this year is asking for the industry to stay the course, invest more. So has there been a shift in the administration? Have you shifted your position?
I think they have to do both. I mean, I think they recognize, the oil and gas industry recognizes that they've got to diversify. It's why many of the oil and gas majors are moving in the direction of calling themselves diversified energy companies rather than oil and gas. Many of them, and I was at Sierra Week, which of course is the big week that oil and gas majors and other energy companies go to Houston. All of them that I talked to, except for maybe one, said that yes, diversification of our business plan to move to clean is smart for us because we can see where this is heading. We know where, as we say in Michigan, we know where the puck is heading, and we've got to skate to that. And so that's why you're seeing a huge amount of emphasis on, for example, building offshore wind platforms because they know how to build offshore oil and gas rigs. You're seeing emphasis on putting charging stations at gas stations and not resisting that. An emphasis on biofuels, an emphasis on carbon management, an emphasis on hydrogen. All of these strategies to have them diversify and capture this movement, this transition to clean, which they very much see.
So I would still argue that the pressure from the administration, again, artificially reduced supply because I think the positions the administration had early on froze a lot of investment in the industry. But you were talking about the transition to other sources. I think we need to be realistic about this. Let me just give you a statistic here. Since the first installation of an LNG export facility in 2016, the decarbonization impact of the U.S. LNG export industry has been greater than the impact of the U.S. solar industry over a 15-year period. I mean, you cannot refute that. So wouldn't we be better focusing on a transition to hydrocarbon and then to so-called clean industry rather than trying to make the jump? For example, if we're exporting LNG, if we're burning hydrocarbons here, we can actually reduce our CO2 emissions and reduce the CO2 emissions globally. we have proved that LNG and hydrocarbons actually are a greater impact for the environment than these wind farms and solar panels. Do you have any comment on
Well,
that?
I think we have to invest more in deployment of wind and solar because it is truly zero carbon emitting, and that's ultimately where we'd like to be. I understand that liquefied natural gas is better for the climate than coal, burning dirty coal or diesel. And that's why, that's why so much of that LNG has an impact. But ultimately, it would be terrific if we could button down the LNG world, making sure that they don't have methane leaks, making sure that their CO2 is also captured and sequestered so that they are near zero carbon technologies. We're not quite there yet, but the bipartisan infrastructure law helps to get us there. Can I just say one word on this? You mentioned that the Biden policies had an impact on suppressing production in the oil and gas. I just want to point to, in March, the Dallas Fed did a survey of all of the oil and gas CEOs. And in that survey, 94% of them said the reduction in production had nothing to do with government policy. It had everything to do with Wall Street. Wall Street was clamping down on the oil and gas industry because they didn't want to see investment in further production, capital investment. They wanted to take advantage of this increase in cost to be able to get customer buybacks, and they wanted to exercise what is known as fiscal discipline. So that was the biggest reason why you've seen a dip in production. It was not, 94% said it was not because of government policy.
I'm over time, but just a quick rebuttal. So I think Wall Street, if you're talking about Wall Street, capital is going to go where capital is treated best. So when there's rhetoric saying that we want to eliminate fossil fuels or your administration wants to eliminate fossil fuels, there's not going to be investment in hydrocarbon. So I would say you're partially right.
Well, it was happening
that it was
long
Wall
before
Street.
the Biden administration.
It was Wall Street, but
it was happening long before the Biden administration. This pullback. We're asking them for increasing supply. That's what the Biden administration did. They had pulled back long
sorry,
ago.
we got to move on.
Sorry.
Congressman Finley.
All right. Thank you. And it's nice to see you, Secretary. And I was really happy to host you on your recent visit to Nevada and show you our leadership in grid modernization and cutting-edge technology, and of course, the weatherization assistance program. I know we've connected on this issue again before, but I would be remiss if I didn't mention nuclear waste at Yucca Mountain. And as you know, Yucca Mountain has been a failure in both policy and science for decades, and we've been greatly encouraged in Nevada that this administration has committed to consent-based siting. So I just wanted to ask you, can you provide an update on the status of DOE's request for information on consent-based siting?
Yes, we put out that request for information on the consent-based siting in December. We've gotten now over 200, I think the period is closed, we've gotten over 200 responses, I think about 225 responses, and we are evaluating those, and we'll be taking our next steps and our cues from what communities may have expressed interest or at least want to have a further conversation about it. So the process is ongoing and continues.
Good. We're encouraged by that. As you know, Nevada is the leader in renewable energy generation, especially solar, and has committed to a 50% standard by 2030 and a goal of net zero by 2050. But to achieve these goals in Nevada and across the U.S., we need to modernize transmission so that the grid of the future can get this clean energy from the sources to where it needs to go. And I understand that DOE established a grid deployment office. How exactly is that office supporting implementation of the Investment and Jobs Act funds? And what more can we expect to come from this office in the coming months?
Yeah, thanks so much. I mean, the grid is just a huge machine across the country and very complicated and in parts very dilapidated. So we need to increase capacity of the grid, and the Grid Deployment Office is going to be working on the planning with local communities about doing that increased capacity. We need to identify the best spots where there are gaps, and we need to make sure we're using the next generation technology to make sure that parts of the country can talk to one another. And to encourage, for example, regional transmission organizations like what what Nevada needs to have a Western transmission grid that can deliver energy to places that need it from places that are generating it. The smart technology, the cyber, security from cyber attacks, resilience, making sure that we are, where it's important, burying the wires, or otherwise making them resilient from fire or from extreme weather events, and additional capacity are all under the purview of the Grid Deployment Office.
Great, thank you. Looking forward to continuing to work with you on that. Speaking of severe weather events, Nevada faces record heat, and I'm also very concerned about many of my constituents struggling with high energy bills. And we had a chance to tour a weatherized house in my district earlier this month, and that was a great demonstration of the energy and money savings that we can achieve through some of these programs. Under the infrastructure bill, we included a $3.5 billion investment in the Weatherization Assistance Program, and the administration's budget request right now proposes a new initiative, the LIHEAP Advantage Pilot Program. What results can we expect from this pilot program, and how will it complement the funds in the infrastructure bill?
Yeah, there are two pilot programs that are involved in weatherization. One is the LIHEAP one, because we spend a lot of money as passed through to the states on paying for the high energy bills of people who can't afford it, but we don't do at the same time weatherization of their homes, so that you don't end up having to spend all of that money on weatherization. So the LIHEAP pilot addresses that, and it's a partnership with HUD to make sure that happens. The second is that many homeowners are turned away from the weatherization program because their home doesn't qualify because there may be a structural deficit. Maybe they have mold. Maybe the roof is not structurally sound. So we have a pre-weatherization component of the budget, a $40 million slug for that, to make sure that these homes are ready to be weatherized. And these are often the homes that need it most. There are almost 40 million homes across the country that are weatherization eligible. And unfortunately, we only usually do about 35,000 a year. So we have a huge amount to go. That $3.5 billion gave us the ability to do another 450,000 homes. That's great, but not just a drop in the bucket compared to the need out there. So I hope this committee can support increases to the weatherization budget.
Great, yeah, no, this is an important program, and one that is such, not just energy, but cost saving for so many people. Thank you, and I yield the time I don't have.
Mr. Ryan.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Secretary. We appreciate your leadership on all of these issues. Thank you. Two quick questions, because we've got to run and vote. One is on the Build American, Buy American Act, which we had included in the bipartisan infrastructure bill. Senator Brown was very helpful in the Senate. We're going to conduct some pretty vigorous oversight on this, because we've had Buy American over the years and doesn't always end up the way we want it to. And agencies were supposed to comply by May 14th, and I'm a little concerned that the Department of Energy has already missed a statutory January 14th deadline.
I want to look that up while
Okay.
you're talking. So
Okay.
keep
You
going.
could take that for the record, unless you have it.
Yeah. Like, keep talking. I want to see if I have it.
Okay. Just wondering what steps you guys are going to take to identify the federal assistance infrastructure programs not currently applying Buy American.
Okay, so first, I do have that information. We did miss the January 14th deadline, but we did transmit it to Congress in early March, and it is publicly available, and we're working to have it posted on the Federal Register, so just to let you know.
Okay.
Totally agree with your emphasis on Buy American, as
know
you know
you
the
do.
administration does as well, and we're so excited that the components ended up in the bipartisan infrastructure law. It means so much for all of these programs, including the funding that we will be putting out in funding opportunity announcements for some of these demonstration projects, as well as what we're purchasing in the federal government for our own use, the FEMP, the Federal Energy Management Program that has been moved to the infrastructure column of our new reorg, is all about making sure that we are able to buy American. We have gaps, though, as you know. We have supply chain gaps. And this is just the overarching. We have to fill those gaps with American American businesses and American mining and American, all of that, the gaps in the supply chain. So to build on what you have already put your footprint on, we have to build out the full supply chains for all of these, including solar, the Solar Energy Manufacturing Act that has been proposed. I hope we support the manufacture of these energy technologies in addition to subsidizing the generation of the energy itself.
Right. It's a great opportunity for us.
Yep,
So
sure
I know you
is.
know that in Michigan. We want that in Ohio. We don't have to be enemies all year long.
I know.
Just one
We have
afternoon
that
in the
Midwest
fall.
Great Lakes thing.
One other issue real quickly. Implementing policies to address climate change is vital, as you know, but this cannot be done by turning to solar cells that are made in China, which is a big concern that I have in China's coal-fired factories. And this is especially true as it relates to the solar panels used to power the federal government. Primary method by which the federal government buys most of its solar power is through solar power purchase or similar agreements, meaning the panels belonging to the company supplying the power do not have to meet any Buy American requirements. And this is a pretty big loophole, so we wanted to bring it to your attention. I'm going to be introducing a bill which does just that by expanding Buy American to mandate any solar panel used to generate electricity provided under a solar power purchase agreement must meet the Buy American standards. So I would welcome your support and that of the department, and I would hope you'd be open to working with us on that.
Absolutely open to working, and that's another reason why we have to continue to build out the solar supply chain here, because China has such a big footprint on it.
Yeah, I mean, we're trying to go green, and we're using coal and all the, heavy fossil fuel energy over there. So thank you so much. Appreciate it. Always great
Thank you
seeing you.
so much, appreciate it.
All right, Mr. Simpson.
Thank you. I'll be very interested to see how this community-based, consent-based thing turns out. You had 200 applications, or at least
Well,
inquiries.
Right, they responded to a request for information.
Yeah,
I
it's gonna
am
be-
certain that some of them were objecting.
Yeah.
So.
It's gonna be fascinating to see how many of them are serious about it when they find out that the federal government isn't working on a permanent geological repository, and that they are likely to become the permanent repository, and how much that's going to cost us. The city of Las Vegas came to me one time. This has been, 12, 14 years ago. They were about ready to withdraw their objection to Yucca Mountain and support it. But when I asked them what they wanted, there was no way the federal government could afford it. We could put our whole budget into the city of Las Vegas. I mean, you can buy the support. It's going to be interesting to see how that turns out. I just want a solution.
Me too.
People think I'm just pushing Yucca Mountain. I will tell you, as I've told every secretary, don't fill up that whole $14 billion hole in the ground, because we're going to need a place to store all the studies that have been done by the National Academy of Science on that hole. It is the most studied piece of earth in the world. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. We just need to solve this problem. In my opening statement, I mentioned my overall dissatisfaction with the lack of priority given to the nuclear energy programs, and I'm particularly disappointed that the budget request does not include funding for ongoing demonstration activities within the Advanced Small Modular Reactor program. The NuScale SMR recently received its certification from the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, the first ever NRC-approved SMR design. There is a Western utility signed up to deliver this reactor. There has also been international interest in this SMR. I intend to work once again to add funding to this for this important demonstration project, and I support the other demonstration projects that we're doing also. Will you commit to working with us to ensure that continued progress and ultimate success of this project?
Yes,
It's a very important project.
it is.
One other thing I want to talk about for just a second. We've been talking about Buy America and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and this is kind of in your bailiwick, but not really. I mean, critical minerals and the permitting process. When we talk about Buy America and you have to have solar panels that meet that standard and so forth, problem is the critical minerals used to buy them. To build them are not in the United States. We buy them from China. We buy them from people that don't like us. And while you are not the permitting agency for the ability to go out and get these critical minerals, they're on public lands and stuff. It's the Department of Interior, the Forest Service, or something else. You are the end user of a lot of these critical minerals. Is there any type of interagency
Yes, there
group
is.
that is working to solve this, to streamline the permitting process? Because we can't be dependent. If there's anything we've learned from this pandemic, whether it is for our precursors, for our medicines, whether it's our critical minerals, whether it's our rare earths, we can't be dependent on people that don't like us to supply these.
Completely agree. Yeah, completely agree. Yes. You can do sustainable mining, and it would make our minerals more attractive around the world as well as for our own use.
Yeah.
So there are best practices out there. It is ridiculous how long it takes anything to get permitted. So there is an intergovernmental group that is working on this right now, on speeding up the permitting. For mining is one, because the president has called for us to make sure that we have a critical minerals strategy. In fact, today, he announced as part of the Ukraine supplemental $500 million that will go through the Department of Defense for critical minerals. The Department of Defense was one of the entities that led the authoring of the critical minerals supply chain, of the 13 supply chain reports that were issued last year. Critical minerals was one of them. The Department of Defense issued that. We worked with them closely. So yes, we have got to make sure that we can get the minerals and get them quickly. So the permitting is one, and making sure that the extraction process is sustainable is another. I was just at Salton Sea in California. That is the largest geothermal brine of lithium. Huge opportunity, 600,000 tons potentially of lithium. And they are using geothermal to extract it in a responsible way. We have got to move on that, right? So permitting is critical. Let me just say, on the budget itself, our budget, we have really got to focus a crosscut on critical minerals. For example, the FECM, our Fossil Energy and Carbon Management Office, has been working to make sure that we can get critical minerals from coal waste, from acid minage, et cetera, mine waste. The bipartisan infrastructure law, we're going to be issuing next week a funding opportunity announcement in the battery space, but we don't have any place to process critical minerals, and the processing is a problem. So one of the pieces that the infrastructure law supported was to do money for processing, and that's going out next week. So we believe this is a hugely important gap of supply chain and a national security issue, and that we should be extracting our own, to the extent we have. If you ask the National Geologic Survey, we don't have all of the minerals that we need. For example, we're a little shy on nickel, and Russia supplies a lot of nickel. We don't want to get nickel from Russia. So what do we do? And that's part of the global strategy that we want to do, is identify allies that have the capabilities that we don't have, that we can partner with to ensure that they are able to supply us too.
Yeah. China has been very good at
buying
up those supplies in other countries, in Africa and other places.
Their Belt and Road initiatives.
Yeah, it is devastating. I will tell you, I mentioned this with the Secretary of Interior at a hearing this morning about the need to do this and the permitting process. They're obviously more directly involved in the permitting process and so forth. But as we learned, we're about to learn the names of a lot of minerals that people don't know anything about. Yes. One of them is antimony. I didn't really, I had a degree in chemistry, and I don't really know that much about antimony, but the Department of Defense says it's critical. If you're going to do anything with solar, you're going to do anything with nuclear, you're going to do anything with batteries, antimony is a key thing. We've got a mine in Idaho that was built during World War II for defense purposes, and it was just left. It's in disrepair. It actually pollutes the river just sitting there. We've got a company that comes in and that wants to clean it up, and also can get golden antimony out of the tailings and stuff that were left there, and actually end up with a cleaner environment. And it's taken 6 years so far, and they still don't have the permit for it. We got a cobalt mine in Idaho. It's taken 10 years to get permitted. And we've got to change that. And nobody wants to go in. When you say mining to most people, they still think of that picture of the fire hose blowing away the side of the mountain in San Francisco or in Sacramento in the gold mine. It's not how we mine anymore. And nobody does it better than we do in the United States. So We need to make sure that we can get this in place and still keep our laws in place that protect the environment and stuff. So anyway, I look forward to working with you and hearing what this intergovernmental agency committee is coming up with.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ranking Member Simpson, and I'll say I share your concern about critical minerals and materials and how to maintain an edge there. Congresswoman Bustos.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to our ranking member as well. Thank you, Madam Secretary, and to your team. Appreciate your leadership. I'm going to go to my favorite topic, and that's biofuels. I know every time that I've had a chance to interact with you that I bring up biofuels.
You do.
And you've been very good about talking about specifically the heavy-duty transportation, like aviation. So, you know, I see biofuels as this win-win-win. You've got climate, it helps the climate, it helps energy security, it helps our rural economy. The congressional district that I serve in Illinois is mostly rural. And so that's why I always bring this topic up when we're talking energy. So last year, your Bioenergy Technologies Office announced new funding for biofuels. And it was specifically for research for heavy-duty transportation. And I was happy to see companies and research institutions in Illinois like ADM who were getting in on the action. So for fiscal year 2023, the Biden administration has requested increased funding for the Bioenergy Technologies Office in Department of Energy with an eye on scaling up new technologies that can help decarbonize all models of transportation. So specifically, Secretary Granholm, can you please tell us a little bit more about why it's important that Congress provide additional funding for that part of your office and the role that Department of Energy sees biofuels playing, especially if you can drill down a little bit on ethanol and biodiesel and how that can help reduce transportation emissions?
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for saying that. I mean, there's some vehicles that it's just too difficult to electrify. I mean, we'd like to move toward electrification, but it's just not realistic. I'll just say that. That's, of course, the heavy-duty vehicles, and that's, of course, aviation. That's why we're excited about the aviation, Sustainable Aviation Fuels Grand Challenge. It's why we're putting, and in fact, you know, you were talking about the EERE funding, and we're increasing. Part of the increases is related to this because we do think that biofuels are a key part of that future. The Biofuel Technology Office has focused on several components, and this is often in partnership with the Transportation Office, with our Vehicle Transportation Office, because they run on three pillars. They either want to electrify vehicles, they want to do electric fuel cells, or they want biofuels. And so the opportunity with biofuels for helping the planet, reducing CO2 emissions. Certainly in aviation, that's a huge problem. We want to get to 100% sustainable aviation fuels by 2050, and the challenge that we have is to get 3 billion gallons by 2030, and then the full slug by 2050. But we think this is also an economic opportunity. I mean, there will be the need for 400 additional refineries across the country to be able to meet that challenge. So biofuels is definitely a part of the sustainable future. Our agricultural community is definitely a part of that future. They see it all the time. They see every day the impacts of climate from extreme weather events, whether it's droughts or floods or whatever. They know they want to be part of the solution. So we're very excited about I'm excited to partner with you on this. I know it's a big deal for you in this and whatever the next role you have is, but I'm excited to be able to make sure that we, partner with our agricultural community in particular, meeting the needs.
So I know you're working with Department of Transportation. Are your Department of Energy and U.S. Department of Agriculture, are there other ways you're working with USDA around biofuels or anything that you can talk about specifically?
Yeah, I mean, the partnership really has been very strong on the sustainable aviation fuel because that's together we're doing that grand challenge. The Department of Agriculture is blessed with ability to have resources that some of the other areas of clean energy are a little bit starved for. So working with the Department of Agriculture on, for example, sustainable forest and forest management and using forest waste as a way to blend into the biofuel economy is a really important part of our partnership as well.
I'm really glad to hear you talk about the impact on economies and especially rural economies. You come from Michigan, obviously, I'm Illinois, but you understand the importance of helping to build up the rural economy, and you can play a very important role in that in your, at the Department of Energy. So thank you very much. Great to see you, and I appreciate you answering my questions. I will yield back, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Congressman Bustos. I have to put a story on the record. When Senator Tom Harkin was serving in the Senate on appropriations, and I was on agriculture in the House, we went to the Department of Agriculture before the word biofuels industry had even been born. And we had an amendment, and we started in appropriations, not in authorizing. And the amendment was to go to USDA and say, look, you already do food, forestry, and fiber. We want to give you a fourth F, and we're going to call it fuel. They walked away. We had to force language on them through appropriation bills to get them to look at fuel. All right? Now you couldn't take it away from them. But I just want to make sure the history's right. I'll put it on the record here, that sometimes even our genius departments can't find their way out of the woods. And they need the American people to help them out. So I'll never forget, I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. We had Republicans, Dick Lugar of Indiana, God bless him. He saw the future. John Glenn of Ohio. There were people who cared back then, but it was like, whoa. Couldn't see it. So we flew, and I'll put on the record, the first guard base in America to fly a biofueled plane came out of Toledo, Ohio, the 180th Fighter Wing. And it was a smaller plane than an F-16 in those days. But anyway, it's just interesting to see, hey, and now America's made real progress. But what we don't know to this day is, if you plant an acre of a plant that can produce fuel for the different regions of the country, we still don't understand what is the maximum BTU output for the minimum of BTU input. We're still not there, but we're going to get there. And with climate change, it's going to be even more complicated because the ecosystems are changing. But it's certainly possible. So plant science is very important to us. But to get the Department of Agriculture to work with the Department of Energy, good luck.
We do.
Good luck. Good luck.
We're doing it now.
Good. That has been a major hurdle. So I just thought I should put that on the record.
Sounds like a I told you so story.
Well, you know what, Mr. Ranking Member, I want to put it on the record just to make sure that all these geniuses that exist within the Beltway understand that there's genius out there that they'd best access. So anyway, I wanted to call on Congressman Newhouse for questioning.
I can only say good for you, Madam Chair. Well, thank you. Madam Secretary, I want to talk about a subject that's already been broached, advanced nuclear reactors, and I'm sure we both agree that they're a critical part of our energy future. In fact, the department is investing a ton of money into the Advanced Reactor Demonstration Program, and I can tell you in Central Washington, we're really excited about the project between X-Energy, Energy Northwest, and Grant County PUD. So another thing that we'll show you when you come out, we'll talk about. But one challenge to the development is the commercial fuel supply. And you know what I'm going to say about this. Right now, the only source of fuel that they require, it's called HALEU, which is an acronym. The only supplier commercially available for this fuel is from Russia. Congress asked DOE to provide a plan for creating a domestic supply for HALEU. I'm not sure when, a number of years ago, but it's not been produced. And so a couple of years ago, Congress appropriated $75 million to be used for the establishment of a national uranium reserve. DOE has not yet secured that license that I know of for the permitting facilities or the storage capacity to start the reserve. So a couple questions. First, DOE's request for information period closed in February. When can we expect the detailed plan, which would include specific milestones for completion and expected cost? And second, beyond DOE partnering with private industry to build out the infrastructure required to produce the HALEU, another potential source is downblending highly enriched uranium into HALEU. So how are you facilitating conversations between the Office of Nuclear Energy and other government agencies like NNSA and DOD to determine if material available for downblending and how it can be made available
Yeah.
to the industry in a timely manner?
Great questions. First, let me say the issue of having a stockpile, a uranium stockpile, you will see a request for, excuse me, a funding opportunity announcement at the beginning of June for that. So we intend to put that out. That's with NNSA. NNSA and our Department of Nuclear Energy have been coordinating on a plan to make sure we get HALEU, but also LEU generally, because we need for our civilian fleet to be able to have all manner of low-enriched uranium. So you will be able, we're happy to present that to you as soon as it has run the final traps, but it's in the very final stages. I was just presented a presentation of it, and we understand the importance of making sure that we are energy secure, and that includes uranium, and that includes making sure we have the ability for HALEU and LEU. With respect to downblending, I know that the NNSA is doing some of that. It's better to go the the LEU and HALEU strategy because downblending is much more expensive, and HEU is a much more high value material. However, the strategy includes all of that. So you'll see that when they come out, and I don't want to reveal too much at the moment because I know they've got to finish running the traps on it.
And then another issue, and just only have a minute to go here, but I wanted to bring up the Columbia River Treaty. I know that you wear a lot of hats, but you have some relationship here, I believe. I think we're most impacted by this treaty. Ratepayers in my district are on the hook for a huge amount of money, I think millions of dollars, and not getting, we don't think, commensurate value back from that. I'd like, if I could, have you update me on DOE's efforts to support successful modernization of that treaty and to secure an equitable entitlement. If there's conversations between you and state, and if you could help encourage that process to move forward. Frankly, it's been frustrating, the progress that we've seen on that, not just in this administration, frankly, but certainly we'd like to see some movement there.
Yeah, we would too. We know that it is required, the renegotiation, or at least making sure we have the next iteration of it is really important. We don't feel like we got treated fairly in it, meaning the U.S. Side, so it's really important that we complete it. I can bring you, I don't have the details of exactly what the status is of the negotiations, and I'm happy to follow up with you so that you know exactly where it's at.
Well, we could certainly use your help and leadership in this. I think this has been ongoing for 10 years, $50 million a year that are being spent by my constituents, and we need some help.
Okay, let me follow up on that.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Congressman Newhouse. Madam Secretary, we don't want to wear you out, but we're going to ask you a couple more questions here if we could.
Okay.
You use the term deployment on a new focus of the department. I really like that, from pure science to actually getting it to the American people. And I wondered if you might just elaborate a little bit about your thinking about how DOE programs are helping to develop these local strategies to leverage federal resources to address their local issues and concerns and challenges. As we move forward, how do the American people better relate to the Department of Energy? It sounds like you've got some new ideas.
How does DOE meet the street is
Yes.
what you mean, right?
Yes.
To use your words. We're doing several things. One is that we've created inside of that deployment bucket, it's Undersecretary for Infrastructure, a state and communities energy plan, energy program. And in that, this is where DOE meets the street, really, especially with respect to the technologies that we want to get out there. It's called SCEP in the budget. In that office will include weatherization, because that is obviously a really tangible place for that. It will include the Energy Futures grants to state and local and communities, local entities who may not have the resources to do an energy plan for themselves, and they want to. They want to deploy clean energy. They want to create an ecosystem for employment in that space, and they may not have a relationship with a lab or know how to access the federal bureaucracy. So it is a way to give them technical assistance on how to do that. And then sort of complementary to that, we just launched a pilot called Communities Leap, and that is local energy assistance program, and that is for communities that really are underserved, to make sure that they too have it. We just announced 22 communities that were designated this, and it means that the DOE is sort of adopting them to help walk them through the process, introduce them to a lab, help figure out, and they may have communities on the ground know best what their assets are, and we want to be able to say, all right, your assets are here, and how can we help you get to enhance them to the next level? And so, for example, there's a community in Pittsburgh that wanted to use next generation technologies and weatherization to do a whole weatherization plan for a neighborhood. And so we wanted to connect them with the weatherization program, with our building technologies office, to see what grants are out there in addition to what we were offering, to help connect them to the whole of the government, not just DOE. So all of that is our effort to be on the ground. We've hired local specialists, which we have not done before as a department, to get out to make sure that we are connecting with both community organizations as well as local officials. And we are continuing to enhance our effort to have DOE meet the street, as you say, including on the communication side. To your point, you said we should be having Zoom calls, et cetera. I mean, I am out all the time, but it's not just me. It's the entities within the department out. I mean, fortunately, actually, Zoom makes it easier for us to connect more rapidly and efficiently with communities. So we have a whole deployment strategy to make sure that we are accessible and that the clean energy technologies that were built into the bipartisan infrastructure law are available to communities across the country.
I can't thank you enough for that original thinking. That has been something that this department has needed forever. And based on the way that it was established, that wasn't the thinking originally, but it has grown. And thank you for adding that dimension. And we will look at the websites and try to inform ourselves of what you are doing and share it with our membership.
Great.
But thank you very much, very, very much. I want to turn quickly to an issue I just want to raise, because maybe when you get to the cabinet level, your friends over at Labor Department and education might be important to have a discussion, and that's about, we talked earlier, Congressman, our ranking member, Mr. Simpson, on critical minerals in the supply chain. I want to talk about the human supply chain relating to energy, particularly in the public realm. I'm just starting in the public realm, although these same needs I'm going to discuss exist in the private realm as well. It's very hard to find the word in the transportation bill, skilled tradesman or skilled technician or mechanic. It's almost impossible. What you find are words like workforce. That's really interesting. But we know the following. We know right now the United States of America is probably 1 million mechanics short, technicians who will actually have to work on converting vehicles or building different kinds of vehicles or repairing these vehicles. We have millions of vehicles, for instance, that are buses and police cars and fire engines and refuse trucks and dump trucks and ambulances and postal vehicles and excavators, various millions of these in the public sector. I'm not even dealing with the private sector yet. And the conditions that many of the mechanics who work on these work in are terrible. They're terrible. And the less income a community has, the worse they are. So I'm just informing, you probably know this, having been a governor, you got into all the state vehicles and you know what goes on in these garages and so forth. But we're 1 million mechanics short in the country right now in technicians on the private side. And in the public sector, it's so confusing, you can't even figure out how many you're short. I defy anybody to tell me that number. So the need for someone to think about the connection between what the Department of Energy is trying to do with supply chains and the human supply chain and connecting that to the Department of Labor and the Department of Education, I think is critical to bring up the next generation. I was lucky to speak to the Secretary of Education on a number of topics, and I brought this up and he laughed. He goes, "Guess what? When I was in school, they thought I'd be a failure. So they directed me to work and become a mechanic." I said, "What?" And I said, "I found my first friend in Washington who actually cares about individuals who work in this field." I think we need an initiative there that is very important. And to attract and to work with private sector entities, not-for-profits, like the automotive, let's see if I can remember the name, Automotive Society of Engineers,
Society of Automotive Engineers.
ASE.
SAE, I think.
Or SA,
Society,
thank you,
right.
Society of Automotive Engineers and Technicians. I have no investment in them or anything. I'm just saying that the mechanics that are extremely well-trained and have to take national tests before they go work on some of these dangerous pieces of equipment have their seal, and many of our dealerships around the country post a sign if in fact their mechanics have this certification. I think we can really do something tremendous for this country, because many of the people that worked in past generations in these fields died of pulmonary illnesses and cancers, and they still are, because no one paid attention to them. Just know that you have a chair of one little committee here in the Congress, along with a ranking member who's trained in the field of dentistry and who understands something about mechanical sciences that deal with human health, that gets it. And I would really like to do something important for this group of people, for our country. And they're not even easily identified, because some of them are unionized, some of them aren't unionized. A lot of them, a few of them came up in the military, but not enough. And the educational training is very helter-skelter all over the country. So I just wanted to mention this. If we're 1 million mechanics short already, and we know what's happening in the vehicular sector right now is that there are layoffs, because if you make a conventional transmission, you're no longer as much needed as before, and because now we have to make electric motors. But there's not an easy transition there, that we could create some kind of a retraining program and a training program for people who work in this very highly skilled area. And I will quote my brother to you now, who said to me, he was a highly skilled mechanic. He said, "Marcy," he said, "you keep working on preventing the people who are going to work on these new vehicles from being electrocuted." He said, "That's one of your jobs when you go back to Washington." And because he knew what would happen to people, having worked in the field for many, many years. And so I went to the head of our firefighters recently in Toledo, my home, and I said to him the very same thing. And he goes, "Well, Marcy, we've been trained if we go to an accident and there's battery acid all over the road," he said, "we've been trained to lift up the hood and cut the orange cord." I said, "That's it? That's all the training you got?" So I'm just saying to you, that's street reality that I'm bringing in here to Washington. And I just wanted to say that on behalf of all these wonderful people that work in this industry across our country. And having represented major automotive companies, I know you know what I'm talking about.
Exactly what you're talking about.
I just wanted to put the supply chain of human beings into the discussion here today.
You'll be happy to know that we just did an arrangement with AFL-CIO to do a training program for those who'll be going into the battery space from the automotive industry to allow them. So we're developing an apprenticeship program with AFL-CIO on the battery side. Just to let you know.
I knew that you would be at the lead whatever happened, but I just want to know, I want to lift it up.
I appreciate you so
I just want to
much.
lift it
Yeah.
up across the
It's so
country.
great.
Mr. Ranking Member, do you have any additional questions?
Just a couple. Don't mean to keep you any longer, but I was also told that I'd be a failure by a lot of my teachers, and I think they were right, because I ended up in Congress. Who knows? I don't think you're going to, I think if you talk about the treaty that Mr. Newhouse is talking about, I don't think we're going to get anywhere with the Canadians until we serve notice of termination. Because right now, there is absolutely no incentive for the Canadians to get, I mean, they're getting a hell of a deal, and there's no incentive there. So we've been trying to push them to say, okay, let's serve notice of termination, so that they know that they got to deal with this somehow. The other thing is, I'm surprised we got through a hearing and nobody's really talked about, and I'm surprised I didn't. We'll ask a question about it that we'll submit for the record about downblending and where we stand with the state of the downblending of plutonium at South Carolina and WIP, and where we stand with the state of New Mexico. If we've got a case resolved there of whether we can put this downblended plutonium into WIP or not, that's been a problem for a long time.
Yeah, the downblended, I think, has been going to the to the Nevada National Security Site.
But the ultimately is supposed to go into WIP. I mean, that's where we want it to
ultimately
go.
will go into this eventual place that will take all of this.
There's a question of whether we have to expand the land of WIP and the capacity of WIP,
Yes.
and, you know, what the volume actually is measured at, whether it's a 55-gallon drum or the 5 gallons that are actually in the drum.
Yeah.
So I mean,
You are on
but anyway,
it.
I'm surprised that nobody that brought this up, and I'm surprised I didn't bring it up, and I just did. But it is something that we'll ask in a question for some information and
Yeah,
stuff like that.
that'd be great, and I'm sure.
One other thing that we haven't talked about is that when you put together this budget, I suspect it was, 3 or 4 months ago, 5 months
Yes.
ago, something like that.
Yes.
As you know, there is a issue out there called inflation. Now, we could argue about what the cause was. That doesn't get us anywhere. Are we going to see an adjustment in your budget request? Because you deal with an awful lot of projects, major construction, minor construction, everything else. I suspect the price of those is going to be significantly increased because of inflation.
Well, it's certainly a concern, and I mean, this is the 2023 budget, so, some economists are suggesting that inflation is going to level off a bit, but it's just so hard to know because we don't know what's going to happen on the war side, on the supply. So it's something that we are really monitoring, and we will have an ongoing conversation with you all about, obviously, if it's, we don't want any program that's delivering really critical program to people to be cut, but we also understand that, everybody's got to feel a pinch too. So we'll be back with you on it.
Okay, I appreciate that very much. And again, thank you for being here. I know it's been a long and tedious day for you,
All
and
good.
I appreciate your
it. I
your
appreciate
patience.
your courtesy. Thank you so much. You've been
Thank you.
great. Thank you.
Thank you, Ranking Member Simpson, for your stalwart participation at every level, and for the important acumen you bring to this. Thank you very, very much. I have two final questions, Madam Secretary. I also serve on the Defense Appropriations Committee, and I wanted to echo the concern of our colleagues here on the NNSA weapons activities. And you well know the Department's responsibility for our nation's nuclear deterrent and how important that is to our security and strategic interests, which grow every day. And it's a responsibility we all take seriously, and I know you do too. DOD is in the midst of an ambitious nuclear modernization program you've referenced earlier, but that has severely strained the nuclear weapons complex. Previous NNSA administrators and even the current head of STRATCOM have said that NNSA can only absorb so much work at one time. I am concerned that NNSA is on an unsustainable path driven by DOD decision makers that do not fully understand these limits. What guidance can you give me that I can, from DOE, that I can share with DOD and do within the interagency process to rebalance risky nuclear modernization plans while meeting defense needs?
Yeah, this is a really important question because we understand that we have to all live within our means. However, there is a point at we all want to have a nuclear stockpile that is safe, secure, and effective, and that means you have to test, and that means and that means you have to have the facilities for doing that. And we want to have the modernization happen in a way that is, again, using the most sophisticated of equipment, the advanced computer technology, the modeling that is being done, all of this. I was just at the Nevada National Security Site anyway. Without getting into that too much, I just want to say that I completely share the concern of making sure they're able to balance both of those missions and have it be funded in a way that ensures that the Department of Defense gets what they need in terms of the weapons and delivered on time. I mean, part of this, part of it is understanding that some of this is first-time efforts. We haven't made pits in a long time, for example. So the 50 pits that are, going to be delayed, this is, we want to make sure we do it right and that we're not posing any risk, both to the program or to any individuals. So I think the message is everybody has to understand that that the NNSA is doing an amazing job with this mission, and they need to be resourced to be able to do it. And we need to make sure that people understand that sometimes this takes a little bit longer because because you have to be cautious.
One of the issues that a former administrator of NNSA talked to us about was the talent shortage.
Oh, totally.
And the retirements and so forth. And I think it's something that we need to, the one thing about members of Congress, and especially the House, we can reach people. And if there are certain talents that are needed, the going gig in Washington is, well, everybody knows because there's the internet. Today I tried to draw down from the internet what the votes were when Congress first passed the Department of Energy back in 1977. To try to get through a website to find the answer, I had to rely on two of my younger staff. And I thought, and even they couldn't find it. I thought, well, that's interesting. If we can't figure out that, how are we going to find the people we need to talent our various labs in NSA? But one thing we can do is we can work with the department, the members who are interested, just like we do with our West Point appointees, just like we do with Annapolis and the Air Force Academy and the Coast Guard and all the other groups that we try to help. This area is so important. And again, I don't think we're meeting the street. I was shocked to find out that the NNSA administrator told me, I would say about 6 years ago, Congresswoman, no NNSA administrator has ever set foot in Ohio. I was shocked because we don't have a lab. And so the idea that you would even know that such a place existed and that teachers would try to teach those who are in the sciences and so forth, and I thought, we're not doing our job. There's something, again, meeting the street, searching for the talent that's needed. We need to do better. And I know in Washington, it just sounds like if you put it on the internet, everybody will come to it. Wrong. You understand that from having been governor. I really think that we need a better approach to nurture that talent because these are critical positions. And I think one of the reasons things are slow is we've got a lot of retirees. Yeah. We've got a generational change. And I think that DOE's got and NNSA's got to think a little more creatively about how we get the American people to even know you exist. Yeah. I'm sorry, I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, but it's a reality. Maybe all the talent exists in Idaho, I don't know. But yeah, there's we know that by what they send here, by who they send here. But really, I do think it's a challenge. And maybe there's something more that we could help you do. So that's one issue I wanted to put on the table. And finally, in terms of Russia, Ukraine, and energy security, what steps has the department taken or been invited to participate in to help consumers hurting from Putin's price hike on gasoline and other fossil fuel commodities? You've discussed that a little bit. But how are you communicating as the Department of Energy with communities inside the United States and abroad to develop strategies to reduce reliance on fossil fuels and transition to clean energy? What is there a program underway or an initiative underway to help localities think about what they might do within their own sphere to begin to transform to the new energy age?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of that, as I was describing for you, comes from our state community energy program, is really getting communities to think about what their role is in this next generation. And of course, I have talked about what the president is doing right in the immediate in terms of trying to stabilize oil prices. I neglected to mention also allowing for the introduction of 15% of an ethanol blend, so you reduce the percentage of oil at the pump for many places, but not every place has ethanol blend pumps, biofuel pumps. So, ultimately, the medium long term will be to transition, but in the immediate, it's all about how we can increase supply to reduce the price for people.
Yes, I hear you on that. I know across my region, there are millions of kilowatts of thermal energy that are wasted every year.
I see
They
what you're
go
saying.
out into the lake.
Yeah.
I know, and in our water plants, water purification and sewage treatment plants, we are wasting thermal energy. We have to change this.
Yeah.
I appreciate your leadership on the weatherization program because about 40% of our conservation has to come in buildings. And if you haven't visited the DC water plant, I would encourage you to do that. Of all the places in the world that I would take you, I would pick the DC water plant because of wastewater in every city across our country. The biggest energy draw by the cities is for wastewater and water treatment. It's a big sop of money that affects all these communities. But when you see what they've done in their business plan, it's extraordinary. You walk in, the first 3 words you see are, water is life. I thought, I feel comfortable here. And they have done their building in a way that they're drawing up thermal energy, and the building materials they've used, which you've talked about, actually makes the building itself energy neutral. And then they have a business plan to become a public utility that produces energy rather than just consumes it. It's fascinating to look at, and they use some thermal heat exchange to draw waste heat out of the sewer. And the building it's on the Anacostia River here, and weddings are performed in the building that treats sewage.
That's where I'd like to get married.
Well, I'll take you there myself.
I want to see those pictures.
You'd be surprised. You would be surprised. And I thought I've walked in.
So would my wife.
I've walked into the 21st century. When you walk in that building, it's a different way of thinking about energy, about waste energy, about what America can do using technology. It was exciting. I didn't want to leave, and all of our members felt the same way. The people. So I just point that out, and I think about the opportunities we have across our country to capture this new technology and spread it faster so that I'm amazed with some of the homes being built in your part of the country, and you probably know them better than I do, Congressman Simpson, but where the water is put on the south side of the building so it gets the sun energy, and they're net zero homes. I don't really represent net zero homes yet in my area, but to see what's being done in Arizona and some of the western states, wow. In our area, the solar roof issue that you mentioned really fascinates me. And how we are able to move our roofing companies into using the sun more wisely. You're heavily into that, and I had to push that envelope thoroughly because there's a lot there. Anyway, I just wanted to put a few of those comments on the record and thank my colleague, our ranking member, Mr. Simpson, for sticking it out here today. And I want to thank our staff, Scott, very much for his participation. And I would like to draw it to a close. And thank you very much for your perseverance, Madam Secretary. And thank you so very much. I ask the Secretary to please ensure for the hearing record that questions for the record and any supporting information requested by the subcommittee are delivered in final form to us no later than 3 weeks from the time that you receive them, and that members who have additional questions for the record will have until the close of business on Tuesday, this coming Tuesday, to provide them to the subcommittee office. And so for the nation, this hearing is adjourned, and thank you so very much.
Thank you so very much. Thank you both. Appreciate it. You too.